Should you read R. Scott Bakker, author of the Prince of Nothing series? Well, if you like any of these 6 authors who I'm going to talk about today, the answer is maybe. Let's find out. What's going on, YouTube? Michael R. Schulteis here, author of the Rosteval Saga, which you can see, as always, on the shelf behind me. Today I want to do something a little fun and different. I want to compare 6 different authors to my personal favorite author, R. Scott Bakker. All of these authors are fantasy authors, except for one, sort of. For each author, I'm going to give you my reasons that I think fans of that author could really enjoy R. Scott Bakker if they give him a chance. What I'm not saying is that if you are a fan of any of these authors, you must therefore be a fan of R. Scott Bakker, or something is wrong with you. Taste is very subjective. You like what you like. I'm not here to tell you what you should like, but I think there's a possibility that if you like one or more of these authors, you might be a good fit for R. Scott Bakker. What I'm also not saying is that you must like any one of these authors to like R. Scott Bakker. Maybe you really like R. Scott Bakker, despite not having any time of day for any of the 6 people on this list. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Okay, author number 1, Brandon Sanderson. This is my most controversial one by far. It's not even close. In a lot of ways, Brandon Sanderson and R. Scott Bakker are polar opposites in my mind. So I find Brandon Sanderson's outlook on the whole to be very positive. He has a much more light side of things perspective. Even, he'll see the tragedy and the darkness in a character's circumstances and their experiences and their heart, and then he'll give you a way of looking at the world that gives you, I think, a lot of hope, a lot of light. Ultimately, R. Scott Bakker is not that. He's very dark, and that alone might seem like, how can you have, if you have a Venn diagram, how can there be any overlap at all? But what I'm going to argue is that if you go deeper, both of these authors have wonderful characterization. I truly love many of the character studies that I see each author do, and the way that they bring to life people who are often, pretty flawed, have some shortcomings. Now, they handle it differently, and it's toward different ends, but both authors, I think, are wonderful character writers, character creators. So I think that aspect alone gives me some reason to think that a subset of Sanderson fans will enjoy R. Scott Bakker. Now, you do have to be able to handle the darkness. It's not an accident that the first book of R. Scott Bakker's Prince of Nothing series is the darkness that comes before. It's a very dark, they're all dark books. But I think if you like Sanderson, you say, hey, I want something that's a lot darker than this, you should consider R. Scott Bakker. Another aspect of this is that both men are consummate world builders. They both like their intricate worlds. Now, I have to give the edge here to R. Scott Bakker. I think his world to me feels more like the real world. I like that kind of gritty aspect to it. You feel like you get more of these sort of pre-modern perspectives in these societies that are obviously based on pre-modern real-world cultures. I like what both authors do with magic. Sanderson has systems that tend to be very much hard magic. You generally understand how the magic works with a little bit into the story. And then there's some fun things he does with that. With R. Scott Bakker, it is a softer magic system, but I think it's wonderfully realized and adds a lot to the story. So on the whole, I think that there's a lot of reason to think that for a subset of Sanderson fans who want much darker content, R. Scott Bakker could be like your Dark Prince or whatever. All right, from my most questionable or controversial pick to what I think is probably my least questionable pick, George R. Martin, author number 2. This is easy. You like A Song of Ice and Fire? You like all the complicated political drama and machinations and intrigue, and there's some magic stuff in the background, and you have some very flawed but very relatable characters, and, bad things will happen to people you are rooting for. You'll find that sometimes people are complex, and they can have some really despicable character traits, but then they can do something where you're like, I kind of like that person now. So if you like A Song of Ice and Fire, you need to stop this video right now and go buy The Darkness That Comes Before, Book 1 of The Prince of Nothing. Your life has not been complete up to this moment, but it's okay. It will be. You just need to read these books. I'll add that Martin taught much younger me a much more nuanced way of looking at heroism. But, you know, heroism isn't always straightforward. A character who is not a heroic person at all, someone who has done some very unheroic and even very bad things. He's looking at you, Jaime Lannister, can go forth and do some amazing things and some very heroic things too that kind of complicate how you look at them. And I get aspects of this in R. Scott Bakker as well, and it's just so beautifully done. And I think too, you know, Martin taught me to keep going even when very very unfortunate and very dark things happen to a character who you're really rooting for. And that's a good lesson for Bakker's books, I think. I'm going to sum this up by saying that George R. R. Martin is a gateway drug for R. Scott Bakker. Easy peasy. You like Martin, I think you'll like Bakker. All right, author number 3, Frank Herbert. This is easy. Dune is a seismic influence on R. Scott Bakker's Prince of Nothing series. There is a holy war. There is a lot of... There is a charismatic messianic figure created by a eugenics program. It's fascinating, the parallels and the themes, and yet the whole thing feels so like the best possible homage to Dune because it's so original and so beautiful. I'd have to give the edge to Bakker when it comes to prose styling because I think his prose could be the best that I've read in all modern fiction. So again, like with A Song of Ice and Fire, George R. R. Martin, the obvious connection has to do with the expansive drama, the immersive world building, rival factions, and the examination of religion and politics and, you know, how it all works together. I think in both cases you just have this beautifully realized world that you get lost in. So if you enjoyed Dune, you 100% need to check out R. Scott Bakker. I feel very, very confident recommending him to you. Author number 4, Steven Erikson. Huge, sprawling world building. It's all very complex. I read book 1 of Malazan, Book of the Fallen, Gardens of the Moon. I read Deadhouse Gates, and I need to get back to Memories of Ice. It's a superb series. It's the kind of thing that can kind of break your brain. I don't want to make any Malazan fans angry, but respectfully, I would submit that the learning curve here is rather steep for most of us. I will say that if you have conquered Malazan and you find it like, hey, this is amazing, you love it, I greatly admire it, and I'm optimistic I'm going to get there. It's just going to take me some time to climb this mountain. You see, most people find R. Scott Bakker, and my sense of this is that most readers will find R. Scott Bakker's books to have a steep learning curve. But you Malazan fans, you're like mountain goats, ibexes. You're used to going up that nearly sheer rock face. You go, how does anything with hooves climb that? Well, you have, and you do, and you show us all the meaning of what it is to perform this heroic feat of reading. So I think for you, R. Scott Bakker is going to be like, oh wow, hey, this isn't so bad. What's everyone talking about? Because the learning curve, I think, is going to be much easier for you than it is for most people. There's a lot of detail that you have to wrap your head around with these books. But I will say, I see more exposition in Prince of Nothing, which is not saying a lot because, as everybody knows, Malazan, you don't really get exposition at all. So I think that the learning curve is going to be very manageable. I think you'll find a lot to like in terms of the content, the themes, the characterization, the flawed characters, the complex characters, the moral ambiguity in places. And I think that the overall, if you love Malazan, there is a very, very, very solid chance that you will adore the Prince of Nothing books. And that R. Scott Bakker will become another one of your short list of favorite authors. I feel very confident. Okay, author number 5, Brian Lee Durfee. Mr. Durfee is a pillar of our community here on BookTube. He is the author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. These are the 3 books of the 5 Warrior Angels series. I have read The Forgetting Moon. It is really good. I find a lot of points of comparison. Forgetting Moon, you get complex geopolitics, you get religious and political conflict, and you have a number of characters of, as with R. Scott Bakker, you get characters who are of different degrees of likability, and it's a tough world, and sometimes bad things happen to decent people. And, hoo boy, you'll get that in R. Scott Bakker, the Prince of Nothing books. It's a world where characters suffer, and I think that kind of raises the stakes in a lot of ways. So this makes me think that if you love the 5 Warrior Angels series, there's a very good chance that you'll also love Prince of Nothing by R. Scott Bakker. All right, author number 6 is yours truly, author of the Rosteval Saga. Yes, I am on my own list. Deal with it. Prince of Nothing has been a tremendous influence on the Rosteval Saga. I talk about this in another video. Some of the darker elements and themes, as with Prince of Nothing, my series takes place in a violent world with a lot of things that are going to be at odds with modern moral sensibilities, just put it that way. A lot of slavery and conquest and invasion and all kinds of things like that. So I'd say that the aspects of the themes and content, certainly I see points of connection, but there's also a sprawling world. If I do say so myself. If you give the Rosteval Saga a try, you'll find there's a lot of different tribes and kingdoms and rival peoples, war gods, visitors from another world, a couple of worlds even. Now there is a straightforward sense of heroism. Now it's a barbaric kind of heroism. It's a Conan the Barbarian kind of heroism with my books. You're not rooting for the protagonist because he's Prince Charming and embodies morality. You're rooting for him because he believes in himself and he is going forth to conquer and to face other people in battle. So I think if you enjoyed R. Scott Bakker, there's a decent chance you'll enjoy my books. And vice versa, of course, but let's face it, I'm the more obscure author. So, how about you? Have you read R. Scott Bakker? Do you want to read his books? Maybe you've enjoyed one or more of the other authors on this list. Let me know about any and all of it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. It helps us to grow the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will hope to catch you on the next video.